You'd mentioned the veil police. I think whenever we talk, especially with female viewers or listeners, that's their number one question. Do I have to wear a veil? I'm not so sure I want to wear a lacy thing on my head. I feel self-conscious. I wish my wife were here to talk about it because she has some good things
Yeah.
to say about. But as a priest, what's your take on that? What's your response?
So I think I'd like to answer, and this isn't because I have any inclination to be politically correct, but because I really believe we should talk about men and women first as a whole. If you go to Mass, you are at the marriage of heaven and earth. So what would you wear to a marriage? And that's something I would say to both men and women. And if you're going to a marriage, obviously the man's going to want long sleeves on. He's going to want a suit and a tie on. And women, the reason they wear the veil is because in the old rite and in the Byzantine rite, we actually veil that which is holy. Father Wolf had an amazing sermon at your parish in Dallas. Maybe you heard it last year, but he talks about if all of a sudden the church at large unveiled itself, that is in Greek apocalypse. And
Apocalypse
do you
unveiling.
remember that sermon? And
Yes,
and
I
and
was
he
there
actually
for it.
says that's a sign of disobedience. So
Yeah.
it's not just a sign of a woman's obedience to her husband, it's actually the entire church's sign of obedience to Christ as king of that parish to veil. If someone were to ask me, if like a woman were to say to me, Father Nix, I'd like to go to the Latin Mass, but my husband doesn't want to go.
Mm,
Should I force the family to go to Latin Mass? My answer would be no. You should be obedient to your husband because he is the spiritual leader of the family, especially if he wants to go to Mass and goes to Mass. So I want to make that really clear out there before I get into the next part, that if a woman came to me and said, I want to go to Latin Mass, my husband wants to go to Novus Ordo, what should I do? I'd say be obedient to your husband, go to the Novus Ordo because he has spiritual leadership of the family. However, what a lot of trad guys hear a lot more often than that is men coming to them saying, well, yeah, I hear that you really like the Latin Mass. I'm glad your family's there. I would actually like to bring my family to the Latin Mass, but my wife doesn't really want to go. And so there's actually, I think, thousands of men coast to coast in this country. Now, you have a lot of international listeners. I don't know how it works in other countries, but there's a lot of men who want to switch to the Latin Mass. They say their wives won't let it. And without sounding too machismo, I would just say, men, realize that you're the spiritual leader of the family, and your leadership will inspire more than your kowtowing. And I don't know how to say it in a super politically correct or gentle way, but there's headship in the Bible and there's headship in the history of Catholicism.
yep. Yeah. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard a man say, "I want to go to the Latin Mass, but my wife," I hear it so often, and it comes back to the idea of headship. And my response is, of course, be gentle, but be firm on it. But there's a series of other questions that follow after that. For example, who catechizes the kids at home? You or your wife? Usually they'll say, my wife, right?
Right.
Do you lead the rosary every night with your family? No. Do y'all ever pray the rosary? Sometimes. Who leads it? My wife, right? All of these things. Who's in charge of the finances? My wife. Do you have a budget? No. So you basically kind of realize that it's not just about the Latin Mass or going to a certain church on Sunday. It's actually a global problem.
That's right.
And that is,
That's right.
are you really the cruciform servant leader of your home who's taking charge of everything and honestly taking mountains of stress off of your wife?
Yeah. And I
Right?
like the fact you say cruciform servant, because there are some problems in the traditional world where it's like, whoa, headship, you take care of everything, bring me food and do everything, and I'll put in 40 hours a week, and as they say in Spanish, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's not what it is. It's like cruciform servant. So even with headship comes, service. You don't get off that
That's right.
calling at all.
Yeah. Now I'm seeing some of the comments here. People are asking the question, Father, what would you say? Because they're saying, what if a woman is just very devoted to the traditional Latin Mass? These are some of the questions coming up here.
Yeah.
I mean, I see this as a problem, right? So you have a woman and she's really devoted to the traditional Latin Mass. Or let's just say maybe she's been going to Latin Mass for a while. Her husband has a conversion. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go to Novus Ordo. I mean, that's a difficult situation. You still stay,
Yeah.
make it work, go with the husband?
Yeah, keep the family together, but I'll say this. Do your very best to influence him to see the power and the beauty of the old Mass.
Right.
You can influence him. Have him meet a few of the other guys. That's what's amazing about the Latin Mass is most guys at the Latin Mass take their role as spiritual leader pretty seriously, which we have to admit is very different than what we see at your average parish.
You know, like find a 40-year-old guy who's, wants to have a large family and wants to live a pure life and wants to get to heaven.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those guys around these traditional Latin masses, and it's a relief
That's right.
as a man to have that kind of fellowship and friendship. It's hard to find in this world.